Section 10.3, chi-squared tests for associations between categorical variables. So this is our second type of a chi-squared test. There are technically two different kinds of tests to determine whether two categorical variables are associated or not. So notice we're talking about are two things associated, not whether one fits another one. So that's kind of the difference between section 10.2 and 10.3. Technically, there are two different kinds of tests of association. One's, and it depends on how the data were collected. The first one is the test of homogeneity. That is when you collect two or more distinct independent samples, one from each population. So you even have two different populations that you're choosing from. Test the association based on the two samples between the grouping variable and the categorical response variable. Okay, so anyway, what you really need to get out of that is that you take two completely different samples. That's a test of homogeneity. Then you have what's referred to as the test of independence. That's when you collect just one sample, and for the objects in that sample, you record two different categorical response variables. Okay, important notes to make though, that these two tests, these two that I'm talking about right here, are not distinguished in StatCrunch. Both are technically called a test of independence. These tests are also not in the same place as the goodness of fit test that we ran in section 10.2. So for everything in section 10.3, if we're trying to see if two variables are associated or not, we go to the stat table's contingency area. And what you'll notice when you go there is that chi-squared test for independence is the default selected test, and so you'll just keep it on that test. So even earlier when we were just finding the expected counts, we were actually running this test without even knowing it because it's the default set test, and it will do it unless you change it to something else. Okay, so we do again follow that same four-step process of all hypothesis tests when we're doing this. My null hypothesis for all of these is that there is no association between the variables, and another way to say that is to say that the variables are independent. So please be careful with the wording. They will kind of switch it around on you. Sometimes your option, like your choice, will be that there is no association, and sometimes the option will be these are independent, but those are just two ways to say the same thing. And then my alternate is that there is an association, and if there is some kind of an association, then another way I could say that is I could say the variables are dependent on each other. And then we have to meet the exact same conditions. We have to check that the expected count is at least 5 in each cell. Okay, so I know it's kind of a matter of semantics because technically you can mislabel one of these tests, homogeneity or independence. You can get that part wrong and still perform the test correct since both of those tests are under independence in StatCrunch. But this is part of a lot of your MLP problems, so it's at least worth a partial credit, a partial point, telling the difference between these two tests. So let's just kind of look at an example of trying to tell these apart. So the first one says, do movie critics' opinions align with the general public? So what they're going to do is take a random sample of 200 movies from the Rotten Tomatoes website. They're going to record the critic's opinion and the audience opinion for each movie. Okay, so which type of hypothesis test should be carried out here? Is this homogeneity or is it independence? So what's important, I think the most important phrase here is this. They take a random sample of 200 movies. So they've only taken a single sample and they've recorded two things about that: critics' opinions and audience opinions. So this would fit the test of independence because again it's one sample with two categories recorded about it. so let's see how this next one differs from that. So this one says, what are your feelings on the value of online classes? You guys would be a great group of people to ask for that. So the Pew Foundation surveyed two groups. They surveyed the general American public, and then they also surveyed presidents of colleges and universities. And they found that about 29% of the general public said that online courses, quote, offer an equal value compared with classroom courses. But over half of the sample of college presidents expressed the same opinion. Which type of hypothesis test should be carried out? So here, kind of the key is that they surveyed two completely different groups. They surveyed some people in the general public, and then the other group was these presidents of colleges or universities. That's what makes this a test of homogeneity, because there were two independent samples taken.